Om Shri Sai Ram, offering my most humble and prayerful salutations at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba. Dear brothers and sisters, it gives me immense pleasure to bring you another episode of his story, his message through the eyes of his boys. This journey has been not only a learning curve, enlightening one for you. In fact, people are sending us so many messages that they are enjoying it. But honestly, we want to confess that it has been a learning curve for all of us. And we have gained so much by remembering Bhagwan and contemplating on his life and his teachings. So we thank everybody for the opportunity to dwell into Avatar's life and his message. Let us continue this evening's journey again and join us to explore further the facets and the beautiful dimensions of Avatar. So let us start with our prayer and we can continue our conversation. Please join me. O Lord, take my love and let it flow in fullness of devotion to Thee. O Lord, take my hands and let them work incessantly for Thee. O Lord, take my soul and let it be merged in one with Thee. O Lord, take my mind and thoughts and let them be in tune with Thee. O Lord, take my everything and let me be an instrument to work for Thee. Sai Ram. Dear brothers and sisters, this topic is really not something that any one of us can claim to know about. But it sounds so funny that by His grace, when we just think of Him, so much of knowledge, so much of learning comes forward, and the joy of which is so difficult to contain. And we find it just a pleasure to share it with the bigger family of ours. And I am so grateful to all of you, all the viewers who participate with us and share their thoughts and comments with us. This exploration of Avatar is an eye opener for all of us, as I was telling, and we have seen so many facets. So we'll continue the journey from the last week to explore it. And for that, let me re-invite my brothers who are this week joining me here. So let me start off by inviting brother Sudhindran. Sairam, brother Sudhindran,
Sairam,
welcome.
brother. Thank you, Sairam.
I've been introducing you every week differently. Uh, Same time, I keep saying the same thing just for people to know, but I think people by now know you. So, Brother Sudhindran has been with 14 years with Bhagwan, but he's popularly known. I'm sure he has got so many other facets, but from his Vedic knowledge and by Bhagwan choosing him to not only recite Vedas, but explain and expound Vedas for all of us in Sai Kulwant Hall. So that was one of the special event which made me remember and recognize Sudhindran. Other than that, I remember you by giving that golden opportunity of yours when you had the chance to become a charioteer of Bhagwan. Well, I think that was a very beautiful occasion. So, thank you, Brother Sudhindran. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sairam.
Let me invite Brother Jagdish Chandran.
Sairam.
Sai Ram, Brother
Sairam, brother.
Jagdish.
Sairam.
Brother Jagdish also has been with Bhagwan for over 10 years. And as we know that he have done your PhD and he's in Germany right now. But Brother Jagdish has been known popularly from his plays. And I know by playing Krishna and so many roles. And all your corridor plays and everything. So that has been an memory for me. So, Brother Jagdish, I know from there you have learned so much, and Bhagwan has chosen that, that kind of an event, I should say a play, to share with you his avataric glimpses. So, welcome, Jagdish.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much for having me here once again. And I'm really uh, grateful to you and to all the other brothers in this group for this wonderful opportunity to reflect.
Thank
Thank
you, brother. And let me invite Brother Hemant. Brother Hemant Sairam, this young looking brother is an assistant professor. So, he has the privilege of studying from grade 1 up to the master's courses, and he's did his MTech. But Hemant, many people don't know that you're a good speaker, and you have also had the pleasure of dramas with Bhagwan. And you're a very subtle, very soft person, but very, I should say, you don't come forward too often. But I admire your insight into life and the way you have grasped Bhagwan and the way you practice his teachings in life. So, welcome, Brother Hemant. So nice to have you here.
Sairam, brother. Thank you very much. Sairam, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Wonderful. So, brothers, last week we had ventured into the very difficult arena to talk about Avatar and his facets. And I recall very well that all of us had kind of felt a little shy in entering into this topic. And with all humility, we took up that, okay, we will share whatever Bhagwan has given us and what we have grasped from him. And we did discuss about a little bit about Avatar, the concept of Avatar as we understand. And we looked at a little concept of what it means to us when Bhagwan says, you are God. What does it mean that when we say we are avatars ourselves, and how does a limited human body, human mind, human being can relate to that concept of I am God? So from there, let us take this journey forward. Let us expand a little bit more on the concept of avatar. So, as somebody said to me, that I think Raju would join us a little later. In our discussion, we said that there were 42 avatars, it seems, from the scriptural point of view. And we have chosen 11 for some strange reasons. Would anybody like to share? What do you understand by that? So people can get an idea about when we talk about avatars, as that there are, when we talk about avatar, we always think of these dashavatars, 10 avatars. But here the concept of avatar was given a little broader perspective, and it said no, they were chosen for certain messages. But if you look at it, there are 42. So anybody, Jagdish, anybody would like to start off?
I'll just begin here, brother, and probably Hemant can join. So the concept, at least the the Hindu mythology or the Hindu philosophy, as we discussed last time, in some sort says every human being is an avatar of some kind. Only thing is the veil of ignorance is what parts from the person who knows versus the one who doesn't know. The Bhagavatam covers something close to 24. It at least mentions briefly 24 of them because of various aspects. Because, even though it sounds very academic and sometimes even foolish to categorize avatar, but yet that is human to classify things and make it easy to understand. So, from the point of view of one of the classifications of avatar is basically based on what they come to achieve. Say something like Amsha avatar, Amshamsha avatar, Avesa avatar, Kala avatar, Purna avatar, and Paripurna avatar. That is one classification. So, depending upon the kind of impact they have, the kind of purpose they have, each one has is, for example, for the propagation of Sankhya Yoga, Kapila came down as an avatar. And that is one of those avatars that was discussed. But if you go to another category, if you look at the categorical aspect, how to categorize, you have Purusha avatar, Guna avatar, Leela avatar, Yuga avatar, Manvantara avatar, and Shakti avatar. Means, of course, again, at least I'm not qualified to describe in detail what each of them means, but based on what we read in black and white, this is what is available. And so if you try to loosely categorize based on these various facets, we have different categories. On one side, you said something like 42. On the other side, you have a sub division of that, or a small subset of that, which is described. And the person who actually sort of brought those 10 avatars, the Dashavatar, into prominence in some sort was Sri Adi Shankara. He was the one who really brought down that major 10 avatars as a classification. And that is where we get those Dashavatar concept, which has 10 prominent ones. He played a phenomenal role in getting that classification. So probably that is what I wanted to add, and I'll pass it on to the group now.
Wonderful. Maybe if somebody wants to give a little quick snapshot of explanation of what are these types of avatars. What is Amsha avatar? What is Amsha avatar? So, Sudhindran, would you like to just give us a little explanation of, so we get an idea about these concepts?
Yes, brother. I'll give it a shot. It's like we are like working together in this, and we are trying to see. It's like how four blind people. I mean, four people are trying to figure out what the elephant is. One is blind, and one is they with so many handicaps, and we are trying to figure out what the truth is, and each one is only trying to touch upon one small aspect of that. So in
Blind
that,
man and the elephant.
absolutely. So so with that, having said that, so it is Bhagwan, the divinity. It comes down for a specific task, and it comes down with exactly what is required to accomplish that task. Nothing more, nothing less. So for if you talk about Narsimha avatar, it came down just for for a very brief point of time to rescue Prahalada and to annihilate Hiranyakashipu. So I don't probably not that would fit into the Shakti Avesha avatar. It was momentary, and then once the mission was accomplished, he is not visible to us any further. So then if you're talking about Guna avatar, it is it's also mentioned that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Radha, they were actually a facet of the very same divinity Krishna. And since they were like, I would say probably close to 95 or 98 or 99% of what the principle of Krishna is, it was so easy for them to associate themselves with that that paripurna tattva of Krishna, and they were always in a minute they could identify and merge with Lord Krishna. So they come down with some parts of the some facets of the divinity. And another example would be in case of Rama avatar. It is said that it is one of the theories. It says there are 16 kalas or facets of an avatar, and Rama avatar came down with I think it was 13, if I'm not mistaken. Brothers, correct me if I'm wrong. Rama avatar came down with 13 aspects or kalas, and Bharata Shatrughna, they formed two more kalas, adding up to 15. So among the brothers, they had 15 of the 16 kalas between them. And then at one point in time, just after Rama's wedding with Sita, when there's an encounter with Parshurama, that's when Lord Parshurama, he realizes who Rama is, and then he gives that one kala that he has to Rama, and then Rama, with Bharata Shatrughna, they comprise 16 kalas that makes them complete. So these are very esoteric and very subtle principle and concepts, that has been mentioned in the Puranas and the in the scriptures that personally I'm still trying to unravel little by little every day. So that is so Amsha is basically one part and not the whole of the divinity. So that's one thing. And when it is mentioned that Lord Krishna was a Purna avatar, or I don't know, probably Paripurna avatar, and there is no distinction between that supreme principle, what we call the Bhagwan or Parabrahma or Paramatma, that principle, and that which came down, which took the form of Lord Sri Krishna in the Dwapara Yuga. There was absolutely no difference. It was complete match of all the kalas and whatever attributes that whatever gunas and attributes that are attributed to the supreme, that was in Lord Krishna. And it is very interesting. Probably Brother Ranganath Raju, he would be, once he joins, he will be able to recollect and recall that padyam that which Swami mentions, that it starts out with E Gunambu Ganinchiye Nadu. When Swami tells that that supreme Lord who had taken the form of Narsimha to protect Prahalada, to bless him, and then Krishna Rama, and then he says that very same Lord has now come as Sri Satya Sai. So I'm not, I don't recollect the lines. I'm sure my brothers here would be able to actually quote that padyam. It's such a beautiful padyam where Swami himself declares that he is verily the same principle which has come down. And that's why when we talk about Bhagwan, he is supreme and he is complete. He has, and that's why it is said, Bhagwan himself has declared that he is Sarvadevata Atita Swarupam, that every name and every form that has been ascribed by humanity and yet to be ascribed to humanity, all that is Bhagwan. That's why Swami says himself in that one of the landmark discourses that he is Sarvadevata Atita Swarupa, which means he is the Paripurna avatar, and then there's nothing beyond that principle of Bhagwan that we know.
I
But yet,
remember in one of the
yeah, please.
informal conversation, I think Bhagwan said even Krishna did the formality of going to school, and he had a guru. But in this avatar, I didn't need to pretend that also. You know? So it was like, he was, and he said even Krishna had to retrieve his steps sometimes, depending on time and situation. But this avatar's will is very strong. In this I have willed, then there will be no retraction. So he makes it little comprehension wise to understand what this avatar came with.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Swami also mentions that in Dwapar Yuga, Krishna lifted one Govardhana Giri with his little finger, but in this avatar, I lift hundreds and hundreds of the Govardhana Giri, or the those mountains, and accomplish multiple tasks. And we have seen that, at a very physical level, the kind of activities and achievements that Bhagwan has single-handedly manifested is just unbelievable. From what Puttaparthi was, as they described, a stone's throw from Stone Age. That was what was the description that was given to Puttaparthi. From that stage, when we look at what Puttaparthi is now, it's just unbelievable, and nobody else could have achieved that kind of a transformation of that place Puttaparthi, and more importantly and more difficultly, the transformation in the hearts of thousands and thousands of millions of people across the world. That itself is, I would say, the proof of who Bhagwan was, because it's rather easy to accomplish so many things, but to transform the humans, I would, and Swami himself mentioned that that is probably the biggest miracle that he's achieved through his sweet, selfless,
Okay.
divine love.
Hemant, you want to add something here?
Yeah, I think Brother Sudhindran and Jagdish gave a excellent um, understanding or a view or glimpse into the different types of avatars. I like the analogy of the blind trying to understand what an elephant is, and that is exactly what we are trying to accomplish here. Um, and when avatars come down over, I think in the last session we had talked about how avatara means the very word talks about coming down. When that supreme consciousness distills into a human form or into a living being, then that becomes an avatar. So usually if you look at the avatars, they are not recognized during their lifetime itself as avatars. In fact, that is not their prime motive. They're not there to come and say, I'm the avatar. They come to accomplish, like Jagdish was saying, a very specific task. And once the task is over, they're not seen anymore, like Narsimha avatar, when you talk about. It is only after ages, after many years, after thousands of years, humans look back at that and then they come to an understanding of, oh, this must have been an avatar. They look back and then they realize that was an avatar. So you're looking back in time, looking back and trying to understand that phenomena that happened or occurred, and then you realize that would have been an avatar. Over time they become avatars, so during their time itself they're not recognized. But we'll come to Swami. But the unique aspect about Swami is people realize that this is a divine being, this is not ordinary. In during his lifetime, very few avatars have had that. But most popularly, we have only heard of Dashavatars, the 10 avatars, because they come as part of the Bhagavatam, and they are specifically the avatars of Vishnu. So Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, these are all different aspects of the same portfolio, the same Godhead, taking on different functionalities. So in Vishnu is the protector. So when God takes on the role of a protector, he we consider him to be Vishnu. And so Dashavatars are very popular because they have been eulogized in the Bhagavatam. And so we are very familiar with the Dashavatars, but we can think about Dakshinamurti, Dattatreya, so many other avatars which are already which are part of the folklore, which people are aware of, but need not be the Dashavatars. So there are many more avatars. And if we look into it further, like brothers were telling before, each of us is like an avatar. And we have some amsha. Like Bhagwan says in the Gita, Mamaivamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. You are all sparks of that same divine being. You're all come out from that same fire. You're all the same sparks. And um, So I think Brother Sudhindran was talking about the amshas, so different kalas. So when we talk about Rama, we say he had like 13 amshas, and then the brothers were some of the amshas, and then Parshurama was one amsha. So the after Parshurama was Rama. So both of them existed at the same time. So there are multiple avatars which are having different aspects. So what are these amshas? So these amshas are human understanding of what an avatar is. So we try to put some labels onto the avatar, trying to again, going back to that analogy. That's such a beautiful analogy. Okay, this this is a pillar. You're touching the elephant's legs and saying this is a pillar. You're touching the trunk and saying this is a snake. You're touching the ears and saying these are like huge fans. So we are trying to put some labels onto this avatar. So in that sense, Parshurama had some labels. So he had come down because the kings were corrupt in during his time. God came down to annihilate the Kshatriyas. So Parshurama came out and he wiped out all the kings, all the wicked kings. Now, once that task was done, his work was over. And then Rama came down to set an example to be a rightful king. So one aspect was wiping out the kings. Then God comes down and says, now there are no more wicked kings. How should a king be? How should an ideal human be? And he sets an example. So once the two avatars meet there, Parshurama's work is done. So that Kala comes to Rama, it is said, and Rama then sets an example. So that is the analogy between how an avatar comes down with one aspect and accomplishes the task, and he's done. He's not there to claim that I'm the avatar, and that is how we try to understand what an avatar is. And Krishna came when it was the Yuga Sandhi. Dwapara was becoming Kali. It was a very difficult time, a lot of anarchy.
I
And
like that word, Yugasandhi.
The Dwapara itself means dual-minded. So that confusion that was there, he came to lay out the course, and he said, "This is how you should be." He lived it, and he also taught it through the Gita. And so it's very difficult to comprehend the complete understanding of an avatar. As we again go back and think, we are just what our senses are able to grasp, we are trying to label an avatar, and that is what we are trying to do today. So it is sort of foolhardy to assume that we classify an avatar into some bins and say, okay, once it falls into these bins, that's an avatar. So if we are going to bring up, I think we'll discuss about those aspects, and if we look at some of those aspects, we will see that humans also have some of those aspects. But then what makes an avatar different from a
Different.
human? That's what we'll
Actually,
talk about.
Bhagwan also used to beautifully say, one day somebody said, Swami, as we learn, somebody had asked a very, I don't know where the conversation took place, but somebody had said, Swami, I believe avatars are Vishnu's avatar. So are you Shiva's avatar or you are Vishnu's avatar? Then Swami looked at him as if, like, what is wrong with you kind of a look. And then he said, Eme Prayojandra, what is the use of staying with me for such a long time and still making this mistake? You know? So because then he talked to the boys and he said, I don't expect after staying with me, you should know that he gave that hint. And then later on, I think in the conversation, he will tell that all this is explained for common people to understand and to get little comprehension about appreciation about avatar. But once you understand it, then you should know that all this is one only. So there's nothing like Narayan's avatar and Shiva's avatar, and then you have 10 avatars. So, like Sudhindran said, and Jagdish mentioned that all of us are gods. That's what Swami said. And so to look at the avatar is another duty. But having spoken that, let me take this conversation a little forward. You know, in our culture, from an Sanatan cultural point of view, evolution of humans, when you look at it from an ordinary human being to an avataric being with the consciousness evolving, I think ours is the only culture where we have given a nomenclature for each strata of growth. So if somebody jumps up from a normal human being to I say they say he's Mahapurush, he's Mahatma, then he is sannyasi, he is a sant, he's a rishi. So we have the categorization and we are very strict about it. So I'm not getting discussing that part, but there is a logic to every designation. So from that point of view, for a common people to get a glimpse of how do we categorize somebody as an avatar or as a saint, a seer, rishi, what is the credentials? So from that perspective, kalas were introduced. That's my perception. What do you think? Because I know from Krishna's point of view, this whole philosophy was described in Bhagavatam also. And they started with 64 colors in Bhagavatam and then brought it down to 32. And then ultimately 16 were given. So how do you look at the colors? I gave you my sharing. So maybe,
Before we get deeper into this discussion, I will first put a disclaimer regarding the fallacy of these colors. Because at the end of the day, as Hemant very beautifully put it, it's a label given by the mind, and he is beyond the mind. So
Certainly.
the mind can never comprehend what is beyond it. So Swami very beautifully in the Chinnakatha tells that if you ask a crocodile, how does your God look like? He cannot think of anything but another crocodile with probably teeth made up of diamonds and a super strong armored skin. He cannot think beyond a crocodile. He will think of his God as so. That's the fallacy. But a small interesting thing as I was thinking, we have been talking about Krishna and Rama. And if you look at Lord Krishna, we tell Natana Manohara or Maya Nataka Sutradhari. But if you look at Rama, the whole world, even till today, says, "Oh, he's sort of human." Means everyone is believes, is sort of forced to believe that he is still human. But if you look at in reality, who was the better actor? It was Lord Rama who was the better actor. Until now, we are convinced that he is sort of human. And Krishna was sort of, the person who's showing all these emotions and this and that. So that is the kind of dangerous territory or waters that we get into when we talk about labels. Because now, if we flip around our own labels, we find that their description is inadequate. So I just wanted to add this disclaimer before we get into these waters.
Absolutely.
Certainly. Certainly, sir. I think you have really put it in a proper way. That obviously, whatever we are discussing, they in no way limit or give a condition to being an avatar. It is only an indicators. These are only like a guiding indicators, which one can take it in the beginning stage to really put his mind together and say, okay, now I try to trust him or give myself up. Who should I surrender? Here is a personality. So indicators, yes. So we can say.
Absolutely.
Sudhindran, yes, you wanted to say something?
And I was just reminded of when Swami used to very often quote, the example of how was a doll made of salt. If it tries to gauge the depth of the ocean, just in less than 5 minutes, it will get dissolved into it. So, a salt doll can never try to gauge the depth of the ocean. It's just too deep for it to understand. Even if it goes less than 2 meters down, it's already melted. And the classic statement from the Upanishads that says, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha, where the words fail to describe, and aprapya manasa saha, just beyond the reach of mind. So we are talking about that. So the only, and there it says, Anandam Brahmano Vidwan. So you cannot reach it through, you cannot describe through the words, you cannot understand it, categorize it through the mind. We can only realize it, Anandam Brahmano Vidwan, only by the when you experience that divinity and you taste that bliss, only then you actually know what divinity is, or what an avatar is, who an avatar is. So so with this, we are, I think, by now all of us here and everybody on the show know that we are trying to, it's like four ants trying to lift a huge mountain. But I'm sure Bhagwan will bless us and guide us along the way, and when we try to figure this out. Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get at, brother.
Yeah, I think it's very nicely put, brother. And I mean, we cannot stress enough on this fact that what we're trying to comprehend is literally beyond our understanding. Like the Shruti itself says that, like Sudhindran brother was saying. So it's very important to know that we are trying to like project that concept into our lives, into our dimension. Like we go back to that analogy, this is a world of two-dimensional objects. So there are squares, there are triangles, there are trapezoids, all two-dimensional objects. And in this world, a three-dimensional object appears, a cube appears. Can the two-dimensional objects recognize it? They see it just like another square. And that's what we are doing. And once in a while, out of immense grace, Bhagwan gives us that glimpse into that divinity. But it is just a glimpse. We can never understand it unless we realize we are also three-dimensional objects, not two-dimensional objects in this plane. And so, but it is important to dwell on those concepts, to dwell on that. And that's what I think we should do today. Not limit it to these aspects, but understand that how these aspects were sort of understood or visualized in that avatar that Bhagwan is.
And see, use these templates for expanding our horizon of understanding. Use these tools to at least know avatar little bit more, from in our capacity, so that one day we can go beyond these attributes and just enjoy the Lord. But for the beginners like us, maybe probably we need these kind of things as a tool to stand, like a stick to walk. So let us explore that and look at it, how these 16, there are 16 attributes which are given to us by the scriptures to identify an avatar. And the underline is that these attributes must be with the avatar by birth. So avatars do not do any penance to acquire it. That is a kind of a distinction which the scriptures make for us. So here it is. So let us explore it together and see how it looks like. So these are 16. And all of you know that Bhagwan later on, he summarized the whole thing into three only, which was omniscience, omnipotence, and uh, omniscience, omnipotence, and
Omnipresence.
omnipresence. Sorry, omnipresence. So three. So let us explore these 13, say 16, sorry. And as Hemant was telling, that look at them and you will realize that it looks like as if all of us have these attributes. So what is the difference between these attributes in an ordinary human being and a descent, an avatar? Obviously the degree is different, but let us explore it. So I'll open the floor. You can pick up anyone and let's start the discussion and see what could be the. Let's start with the first one. So, what could be the exalted position of daya? What could be daya? When we look at daya, what comes in your heart and mind to understand? What is daya? What is compassion?
Okay, I'll start off. I
Sure.
just recall that those Bhagavan's words, which Brother Ranganath Raju mentioned when Swami describes who is an avatar, what is the meaning of avatar. అవతరించటమేనటలో అర్థమేమి జనులపై ప్రీతి వాత్సల్య పరతతోడ వారి వారి స్థాయికి దేవంబు వచ్చు భువికి జీవప్రజ్ఞతో బాటుగా దేవప్రజ్ఞ. So the very reason for Bhagwan to come down as an avatar is because of sheerly the love and the compassion that God has for mankind. That's what is actually that kind of love, affection, and that the compassion that Bhagwan has for all the humans and all the beings. That's what has spurred that supreme divinity to come down and limit himself to a small physical form. So that itself is this, is a supreme sacrifice that divinity has undergone, in order for the loka kalyana, for the welfare of the entire world. So I would say, the proof of his daya is right there, for all of us to see. The very reason, and that itself is the reason for him to come down. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share with all of you.
So compassion, you are saying, is that when avatar takes the human body, that itself is a sign of
Absolutely,
compassion. Okay,
absolutely.
So
Hemant, yeah, go for it.
yeah, like brother, you were saying all of these. I mean, if you look at this attribute of daya itself, we all claim to have compassion at some time in our lives, in different points in our life. We claim to have daya, and that is true. And we do have compassion, and that is what makes us different from animals, which may be some all the time may be cruel. But there are times when we show compassion, but our compassion, if we very carefully observe, is limited, and there's a difference in our compassion towards different people. What do you mean it is limited? It's limited by our understanding. If we know that someone is suffering, we may feel sympathy. We sympathize with their suffering, especially if it is someone close to us. But there it ends. We may not, it may not spur us into action. It may not spur us into doing something to uh, alleviate their suffering. We may just look upon it. We see in the news every day lots of sad events. At that moment, our hearts may go out to them, but that's about it. We don't take up. If it was, let's say, we hear that our own close family members going through some difficulty, you would move heaven and earth to alleviate that suffering. But if it is someone else who is cut off from me, then my compassion has its limits. That's it. I feel sympathy, but not that sense of empathy. Empathy is that their suffering becomes mine. I stand in their shoes and I feel that suffering. So there is this beautiful Chinnakatha where there is this ascetic who is walking down the road, and he sees a calf that is struggling in the water, in the mud, in the muddy lake, and it's almost drowning. And people are just standing around and trying to encourage the calf to come out. This man, unmindful of what happens to his clothes, jumps into the dirty water, into the muddy water, and picks up the calf and brings it to safety. So they ask him, "We're waiting, the calf would have come out. Why did you have to jump in and get yourself dirty like this?" And then he says, "When that calf was struggling, it was not the calf struggling. I was feeling the misery of that calf. In order to relieve myself of that misery, I had to jump in to save that calf." And that is that supreme daya. Everyone's pain becomes my own pain. But that is the daya of God, that when we talk about. But human compassion is limited based on my own biases, based on my understanding. So um, I, I had this experience where, when the COVID situation was raging, it didn't affect me when I was hearing the news that there was lots of suffering all over the world, and I was sympathizing with that. I didn't really connect with it. They were just statistics, as the news kept reminding me of these many deaths, these many people hospitalized and so. But the moment it hit home, moment I came to know of the suffering in India, moment I came to know about suffering close where I live here in my own community, then the fear and that compassion that goes out were very much heightened. So this was an example of how our understanding of daya is or our expression of daya is very limited. I feel that is, like brother you were saying, the degree is what differentiates us from an avatar. And an avatar, I think, if we look into Swami's life, we will see this daya in many aspects, not just towards humans, not just towards his devotees, not just towards his students, but across the entire mankind, across all the living. Sarva Bhuta
Very
Daya,
nice.
we call it.
Very nice.
Beautiful.
Jagdish,
I'll just
what are your
add on
thoughts?
here, brother. Based on this beautiful analogy that Hemant gave of the calf, one of the words used to describe the Lord Almighty in general and specifically in Bhagavatam is Bhakta Vatsala. The word Vatsala actually is derived from the word Vatsa, and Vatsa is a calf. So the moment a calf is born, the way the mother, the cow, unmindful of what dirt it is having, it licks everything and removes without that kind of a feeling of whether it's dirty or not. It just springs into action and cleans it. That is how the Lord descends, unmindful of what he is getting into a limited frame, limited circumstances, just so that he can alleviate the suffering and probably transform and refine the devotee. And that is the reason why the word Bhakta Vatsala is used for the Lord. But another a little small glimpse into what we saw during the Chennai visit. We were extremely blessed. And remember, Abhi brother, you were also there in that van, which was in the presidential convoy along with us on a few occasions. I think that is a vantage point. You are literally in the presidential convoy behind Swami's car, and you get to see the emotions of the people after Swami's car has passed them. The feeling of awe, a peasant standing with hardly two proper clothes on his body but holding a coconut and flowers. Probably he wouldn't have had enough to eat, but he held them nevertheless as the car was passing as a mark of his devotion or offering. You saw mothers and parents of little bonds putting that kid on the road after that car had passed so that the dust of that car's tires could sort of touch them. You could see tears in their eyes. You could see joy. You could see, probably they could get a glimpse of Swami through the reflection of the glass. Probably he looked towards or looked in their direction. And what kind of euphoria it created. It is because of that immense daya, the daya that we are talking about, that he has in some way or the other connected to them or showed them in their own lives. It is a reflection of that. And many a times when Swami says that your life should become my message, it cannot be, I cannot think of a better example because his daya, his impact on each one's lives was reflected through their expressions on their faces when the car passed by in Chennai. And that was euphoric, brother. It's a similar thing. 80th birthday. Swami's seat was, a chair was being brought down the lift in the Shanti Vedika. Among all the who's and who's of the world present there, big dignitaries, I was standing next to a policeman. Probably he was a constable of the Anantapur district or somewhere around. And in all of that, Swami looks at him, gives him a beautiful smile and blesses him. That man is, means like he is so overjoyed. He sits in one corner. I just keep looking at him and he's crying. He's weeping. Among all that euphoria, Swami connected to that. What can we, I'm sure you can write a billion Bhagavatams. Each one's story is nothing short of a Bhagavatam in itself. And that is the sign of his compassion. As Hemant very beautifully put, our compassion has boundaries, it has limits. His compassion is boundless, unlimited.
Hemant, you mentioned a very beautiful word. That is the pain. You said that we can connect when we see a pain and we show compassion towards that. See, that is what it is. Now, whenever I think from the avatar's perspective, what does he look? If hunger was a pain, then there are million people hungry. Why doesn't the response be the same? It is not same. It is different. But his response of compassion is like Bhagwan used to say, that there is only one law, and that law of karma. Rest all the laws are offshoots of that. Similarly, all the attributes are only one, that is love. Rest, everything is coming from there. So whenever I think of avataric perspective of any outlook and about Daya, if I look at it, what is the problem that he is looking for which he shows compassion? And there comes only one answer to my mind is that ignorance of ours that we are body. So Bhagwan is trying to solve that problem. And he's so compassionate there that he breaks all the barriers. And for him, that is the problem. He says, hey, you are suffering from ignorance. So the compassion is so much that he forgets where is he standing and he comes down to all our levels to remove that disease or fault in us as a compassion, like, hey, come out, wake up, realize. And once you realize, everything else will fall in place. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that is his biggest what's the word? He's pained by our ignorance. He's pained that we are not able to realize that we are just like him. No, it's like when a parent knows that a child is capable of something but is not living up to that or not expressing that capability, they're pained by that. That is the pain that Bhagwan sees in us, and out of compassion, he wants he wants to remind us that you are that divinity. You are that divinity, like Bhagwan says in the Gita. In fact, the very word he uses there, out of compassion, tesham eva anukampartham aham agnanajam tamaha nashayami atma bhavasto jnanadipena bhasvata. In the Vibhuti Yoga, he's talking about, literally, anukampa means compassion. Out of compassion for them or for you, I instill myself as that light of wisdom, jnana deepa, in your heart, so that you will come out of this ignorance, this darkness of ignorance. And that is Swami's biggest pain with he experiences when he deals with all of us, that we are unable to realize that we are sparks of the divine, and we still go about saying, Swami, you are God, we will worship you with coconuts, with bananas, we will put garlands over you, we will celebrate your birthday, we will celebrate Guru Purnima, we will watch your videos, but we cannot be you. You have to come and solve our problems. Please come again, please come again. We are missing you, we are missing you. But we are not realizing, Swami, you are Swami is us. In fact, we are Swami, and that is his compassion. Still, he is ready. He is ready to come down again. He's ready to, how many ever times it takes, whatever effort it takes. He's ready to put on and go about help put on an avatar and go about reminding us that we are divinity itself. And that is, I think, that supreme compassion, and that is the biggest compassion. And from that, the rest of the things flow. uh, I want to come back to this one incident of Sarva Bhuta Daya Swami was talking about, that when we were discussing how Swami expresses that. Like, when we read news, we come across different sad events, but we are not affected by it. We are not propelled into action. If we talk about the Gram Seva, Swami read a small article. Um, he so the This is the genesis of the Grama Seva. So Swami called the teachers one day, all the faculty, into the bhajan hall for the interview, and during his discussion with them, he told them he had seen a clipping in a newspaper where a mother was unable to feed her children because she was not having food, and she took poison and she gave the poison to the children, and all of them died. And Swami's voice was literally quivering, and there were tears that were rolling down. And he said, "How can that happen in this land which is Annapurna? And how can that happen?" And so that was the genesis of the Grama Seva. I have read innumerable articles like that. I have come across innumerable news clippings, but I feel bad for it. I feel sorry. I feel sad, but therein ends it. Then I get reminded of my own problems, and I leave it and come back. It is good that we feel sympathy. It is good that we are moved to tears by that. But real compassion is when you feel that pain and do something to alleviate that pain. You take it upon yourself that you have to get rid of it, and that is what God comes as, to set an example. I know, Swami, we can ask the question, Swami, if you are so much pained, why did you not wave your hand and materialize food for everyone every day? That he could do as well. But then what is the lesson for all of us? What is the lesson? He's come down to set an example. This is how you have to show your compassion. It is just not lip service. It is just not shedding tears, but moving. That seva bhava must become part of you, and you must be propelled
Hemant, you
to.
reminded me, this opening of an orphanage in Shantinilayam. Just outside Mandir, there is an orphanage. The story of that was also similar. Bhagwan was driving by somewhere in that taluk, and he saw children playing during the day. And he asked the person next to him that, why are the children playing? Find out. So the person came back to Swami and he said, Swami, no, it's a school time. So Bhagwan said, it's a school time. Why are they outside? They should be in the school. So he came back and he said, Swami, they are orphans. And Bhagwan got really upset. He said, how dare you call somebody orphanage when I am here? If at all there is anybody orphan, that is me. I don't have anybody anatha. So I am like, he always puns that word. He said, you should not say. And he said, collect all these children and bring them to me. And that is how the orphanage near Prashantanilayam came about. And if you visit that place, it had all the solar heating systems and everything. So he just made it to the class. Obviously, that is Swami's style of doing it. But as you rightly, I was reminded when you saying that, that compassion is not only feeling, it is how you act on it. And Bhagwan shows that in a beautiful examples, how he delivers it.
Now,
Yes,
just want to share my thoughts here. Now, when Swami says, "My life is my message," no, he means it. So like how Brother Hemant mentioned that when we read a news article about starvation, death, we feel sorry about them and we just forget about it. But that spurred Bhagwan, to undertake this Gram Seva, in a major way. So each of these suffering spurs Bhagwan to do something really monumental. We all know how Mother Ishwarama requested Bhagwan, saying that there is no school in this village, and children have to traverse far distance to go to school. Can you not build a small primary school? And then look what happened. It started with the school and then university, and the whole works. And so how Ishwaram were requested for one small dispensary, and then that how Bhagwan converted that suffering, that one particular instance, he took that as an excuse, and then the whole
super
general
specialty.
hospital and super specialty hospitals sprang up with the latest technology. And how when there was just one well and acute water scarcity, because it's an arid region after all, Puttaparthi, Rayalaseema. And when Ishwarama requested Bhagwan, and so that led to it started with digging a small well, but it didn't end there. The huge mega water supply projects that Bhagwan executed. So, and it's a I would say it's a recurring theme. I would say it's a typical way which Swami reacts, or divinity reacts. When Prahalada, when he was being harmed, or when he was being ill-treated by his father, that spurred Bhagwan to take the form of Narsimha. So, and I think it all comes down that paritranaya sadhunam. So whenever there's a suffering, among the, humans, the devotees, that becomes an, that sets off a reaction, which propels divinity to assume the avatar and, come down and come to the rescue. And yet again, how like it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, arthi artharthi jignasu jnani. So whoever, when they are suffering, at various levels, it could be because of lack of food and material comforts, it could be because of diseases, it could be because of when they are wallowing and trying to grasp the knowledge, the jnana, each at the various steps for the artharthi jignasu jnani, Bhagwan bestows them with what is required at that very point of time. So that it is ultimate is nothing but how a mother responds to a child crying out. The child could be crying out because it's hungry, or it could be feeling cold, or it's soiled its clothes. It could be anything, and mother rushes and provides just what is required to make that baby comfortable and happy again. So it is that natural feeling, that vatsalya, which Jagdish brother talked about. That when we children cry out to our divine and father and mother, Sai Baba, and Bhagwan responds with whatever we require at that point in time. So that's what I just wanted to share with all of you.
One more small thought here, if I may. This was what Swami shared with one of the teachers, and he gave a very beautiful analogy of the fence sitters. In a classroom, which student does the teacher focus on? So, and Swami's explanation is as beautiful, it's amazing. He said there are the three categories of students. One category is like extremely studious, intelligent, capable of thinking on their own. The teacher does not focus on them. The second is those students whom like absolutely they don't want to put in an effort, they are not interested, and no matter how much effort the teacher puts on them, there is going to be no result. So that's another category. Though the teacher tries, but that's the other category. There is a third and interesting category, the fence sitters. They really do not know. They are looking for some guidance. And if there is a little push, there is a possibility that they can jump from the second category to the first, that they can become studious. And Swami said the avatar comes to bring about a shift in consciousness of the fence sitters. Like there is a scope. You give it a gentle push. You give them a small, a small impetus, some force, and they might go onto this path of inquiry or trying to know. Because as Hemant very beautifully was mentioning, and even Sudhindran Brother touched upon it, that yada yada hi dharmasya. Why does he come down? There is an alternate version or alternate description of the yada yada dharmasya, that is for the agyani. What the agyani also tells is that I also keep coming. The Lord nevertheless keeps incarnating time and again. The agyani tells I also keep coming. Avatars come and go, but I am eternal. I will be in my ignorance. I will not improve. I'll not question. I'll not evolve. So the biggest, the multi-million dollar question is basically this: am I willing to evolve myself? And if at the end of this whole effort, if I am not prodded to at least think, take one step in that direction, we have caused grief for him, or we have sort of, in a very indirect way, communicated to him that your efforts are in vain. And we want to be in that section of the class who have been positively impacted by that force and have decided to think and come out of this punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam cycle, which is very beautifully described by Adi Shankaracharya. Yeah.
See, and before Hemant, you can come in. Uh, I just get a thought here. People have been also prodding that you know, human limitations play a role. I may feel pain for something happening in Haiti, for example, because of the natural calamity, but I am unable to do anything for them. So, Avatar, he has got a bigger magnitude, he can do it. So, how does that play in this game of compassion? So, will I be considered as not compassionate just because I'm unable to assist or do something? How would you interpret that?
No, I think there are enough opportunities to show that compassion in our surroundings with the people that we interact. I think it is more being sensitive enough to understand that people need that compassion. People need that, not just people, every living being needs that compassion. So, all that we need to say is if we are not moved to action, we have to ask ourselves, if it was my own person there, what would I do? Like if I was a parent, if it was my own son who was in that situation, who was having trouble, will I be moved to action, or will I say there is distance, there is I don't have time? It is that feeling of oneness, that is the essence of compassion. So compassion by itself is not the goal here. The lesson is, do you
Oneness.
feel oneness? Do you feel that connection? And that's
Beautiful.
what Swami wants to instill in us. Do you feel that oneness with all of creation? Do you feel that that is part of you? Do you feel that, and are you moved to action? Whatever it is that you have to do for that, you may not be able to act, but do you feel that oneness? And we need to ask ourselves that question. Swami's compassion was not limited to just humans. If you look at, there are many instances. I think once Swami was in Horsley Hills near Madanapalli, and then I think 1960, it was, and staying on top of a hillock. There was no water supply there, and they had to rely on, Swami and the entourage had to rely on water being brought from the bottom up the hillock, and there were no vehicles on that path to do that. So they used a buffalo. A buffalo was used, and it would have leather bags with water filled, and it would get water all the way up. And so Swami stayed there for a few days, and this buffalo was doing this service. And when Swami was leaving, everyone was waiting for Swami to get into the car. He said, "Wait, I have someone to meet." He went to the buffalo, found where the buffalo was, went and patted its back and caressed it, and said, "You have done great service to me." And this is Swami recognizing the effort put by that buffalo. Swami says, Swami often chides as Dunnapota, and he actually, I'm just when I remember that incident, I think of, am I able to do that amount of service to Swami? Am I able to do that amount of service for my fellow beings as that Dunnapota, and become that Dunnapota that Swami was referring to? Yeah. So his compassion is not limited to just humans, and there are multiple instances of this compassion. I'm sure brothers will be able to relate to and recount how Swami's compassion was not limited to uh, just humans or his students. Like on Janmashtami day, Swami would make sure that we don't hurt those cows. We had the opportunity of going to the Gokulam, bringing cows, and these were students who had never seen a cow or never handled a cow rather. And so the cows have that thread which is going through their nose, and it's used to control the cow. So if you pull on that, it tugs at the nose nostril of the cow and it hurts the cow. Swami would say, no, let the cow come, as you just hold that. You don't have to pull it. If you pull, it's going to hurt the cow. And he would be very particular that we don't cause even that much pain to any of the beings.
Even adding to that, a jocular episode in some sense, a funny episode in our Kodai trip. Swami would make sure that everyone gets to sit on the horse's back and have a good ride. And he would be looking at everyone, and there was quite a hefty brother with us. And Swami said, "You don't sit on it, okay? The horse's legs will part. You don't sit. You don't take a ride." So means even though it appeared funny, but you just see the level of detail that he would go into. The kind of detail. In fact, the beautiful episode that Hemant was mentioning, Swami goes to that particular buffalo and says, "Bangaru, you have done tremendous service to me. Continue your sadhana and I'll bless you." Just imagine. He's talking to him as if he's a yogi. Continue your sadhana to a bullock. So what he is looking at is something phenomenal. How his compassion is unbelievable.
See, this is, as Hemant mentioned in a very beautiful manner, that this is oneness. Because for us, we are looking at a form of a buffalo or donkey or a horse, but for him, it is a material which shirt you are wearing. He's looking straight into your soul. And so his communication is as if he's talking to himself. That really gives me a kind of an intriguing thought that all these, what we are going to further discuss also, is it possible in a true sense only if we are realized or only if we are one with the supreme reality? Till then, we are just playing, like a blind man hinting at an elephant, because it seems to me that unless we are one with the God, unless we have realized that oneness, or we at least accept the oneness, we won't be able to even experience the fullness of these attributes. But we live in this fantasy that we have compassion, we have all these attributes. What do you think?
Brother, I would just like to add here,
Yeah.
it's a very, very important point that has come up. Basically that oneness, that, Brother Hemant mentioned about, unless you feel that oneness and kinship, you're not moved to act. You're not, it is, you're rather left incomplete. So, just to give, literally how Swami demonstrated that oneness with another being. I'm just reminded of this episode that happened a long time back. It was Radhakrishna sir who was driving Swami's car. Swami was, I think, traveling from Puttaparthi to some other place,
Yes, a beautiful
and
experience. Yes.
and Swami was apparently closing his eyes and leaning back, and apparently taking a rest or a nap or whatever. And the car, it was a smooth road, and the car was going in good speed. And suddenly, the driver saw that a snake was crossing the road, the path just across. And he realized that it was too close, and the only way that he could prevent running over the snake was to apply sudden brake. And but then when he looked back, he saw that Swami was resting like this, and he didn't want to disturb Swami and cause inconvenience to Swami. So he just prayed, and he just ran over that snake without making any big fuss about it. Apparently, that very second, Swami like flinched and said, "Ah," as if something has hurt him. And then later on, I don't know, brothers may be able to narrate the full story. Later on, that day, when those very same the Radhakrishna and other brothers, they saw that there was a mark of a tire over Swami's back, literally as if something is a vehicle has run over Swami's back. And then when they questioned Swami about it, Swami then mentioned that you ran over the snake, thinking that you should not disturb me. But I had to come to rescue of that snake, because it was not fair that the snake should be harmed because of me, and I took that upon myself. And literally, Swami took that pain upon himself, his body. And that comes with oneness, because Swami felt that oneness with that particular being. It could have been a snake, it could have been whatever creature, whichever creature it could be. And you could have observed Swami when he used to come out for darshan also. He used to walk in such a way as to, even there's a small ant crossing his path, he would make sure he would not hurt, he would not step on it. Now, that kind of sensitivity, that's what Swami, actually compassion for all beings is. And that's why always
Sudhindran,
Swami says,
yeah,
Sarva
you
Jiva
reminded.
Namaskaram Keshavam Prati Gacchati. That kind of oneness with all the beings, that is that's the, I think it is our path and also the destination. That Advaita, the feeling of oneness with all the entire whole universe. So that is what we need to strive for now, and that I think would also be the end when we attain perfection in that. Sorry, brother. Please go ahead.
No, no, just because you mentioned it, I was reminded that one day in the interview room, we were distributing laddus. So, the final crunch, the crushed ones are in hand. So, somebody was giving, and apparently, a little laddu fell from his hand, little pieces, the droplets fell down. So, one boy just wanted to rush to clean it up, and somebody said, "Hey, don't do that." See, we think that Bhagwan, it slipped from his hand, so let us clean it up. It's our natural instinct. But Bhagwan said, don't. And he let it off there. And then, he just sat down and we started chatting. And after some time, you notice that a few ants came, they picked up that, and it started going. And Swami said, I have left it for them, prasadam. So imagine that oneness which we are talking about. Now it just opens up that whole. We looked at that incident before. Personally, me, I thought of it as an omnipresence and a compassion of a different thought of compassion. But right now, when we are discussing this, I am realizing it. The whole expression was because of the oneness, because he knows exactly what is happening to the ant. He could relate to that ant. It was so much relation that he consciously dropped one for them, and he said, one day he was actually standing in the room, and there was a stream of ants going, and he's telling boys, hey, take care, don't step on them. He was standing himself and letting boys be watchful that they should not hurt them. Originally, I would think of it as a different kind of compassion, but compassion in originating from oneness, it gives you a different dimension. What do you think?
I think the lesson is oneness there here. Compassion is just incidental. because we can, I can ask the question, why only that snake? There are so many road kills that happen, so many animals die, so many people are suffering. Where is that compassion? These are just examples where Bhagwan is showing us you need to be connected, you need to feel that, you need to realize that oneness. Once you realize that oneness, everything else will flow from that. So all of these examples of compassion that Bhagwan illustrated or demonstrated is only to highlight that we need to be one with all beings, and it's very important that we realize that true lesson. We don't lose the sight of the woods for the trees. The lesson is oneness there, and we always keep coming back to that oneness with all of his creation, oneness with all of his being. Then compassion is just it flows from that. In fact, all of the other attributes, like Brother Abhi was saying, will flow from that oneness, and we will come to that and we will discuss that in greater detail. But I think that oneness is again.
Let me take you. If anybody has any more thoughts on compassion, we are all welcome to come back. That nothing hard and fast here, but just to add up more flavor to this discussion, I was thinking, let us bring one more. Say Shama, that that attribute of forgiveness. See, most of the time we feel that if somebody has done something to me, I forgive them. So there is a sense of superiority when somebody is forgiving each other, right? I have an upper stand, then only I can forgive you. What do you think forgiveness means from an avataric perspective? Let's open that. Add that. I would not say let's not move it. Let's add to the discussion and bring another flavor to that. So add Shama.
I will just add a few points to begin here, brother. Probably then, and others could add more. The moment, the context that you have given for Kshama, sort of if we say that he is very merciful, then it's a contradiction. If you look from Swami's perspective, who is to forgive whom? He will question. If you are a part of me, who is to forgive whom? This is the classic conversation between Adi Shankara and the Chandala. When he and the Chandala ask Adi Shankara to move away from the path so that he could, the Adi Shankara asked Chandala to move away so that he could go. So he says, who should move? If you are referring to the body, then my body is made up of the 5 elements as your body. So why should I move? And if you're talking about the Brahman within, the Brahman neither moves nor goes away anywhere. It's eternal. It's a witness to everything. Then who should move? And Adi Shankara falls at his feet. So Kshama is treading into dangerous waters in some sense, because then we are sort of telling, and I would sort of circle back to what Hemant was referring to. His Kshama is more like a pity that we are not able to realize our true nature. And
Oh,
anything that helps us to make that one more step towards realizing my own divinity, if I can tell with confidence that I am Swami, I am Baba, if that feeling within me is growing, to one of the devotees, one of the teacher's parents, the only mantra Swami gave is close your eyes, look, or rather, either when you are alone, close your eyes. If you're looking at every object, at every being that you're looking, just look and say, that is also Baba. This is also Baba. And in the end, close your eyes and say, I am also Baba. That was the mantra he gave. And what can be a greater example at a very philosophical level of what Kshama can be? Of course, Swami has very beautifully written that poem. In fact, I'm not even sure, maybe Hemant or Brother Sudhindran can quote that poem better, or maybe it would have been good if Raju was here. Kshama Tejasvinam Tejaha. Swami, Kshama Satyam, Kshama Dharmam. He literally equates Kshama to every other lofty quality. He says that is the crest jewel of qualities. And a slight last point, why I started off with a contradictory note is basically, if you look at the life of Lord Krishna, I will take that as an example. He's considered, in some sense, very loosely interpreted. You hardly found him going out to anyone saying that I forgive you, or I forgive you, of that sort. That never occurred. And sort of my inner understanding, I'm not sure if that is true, I haven't read it, is only that the only reason for that could be that the moment the avatar says that I'm very forgiving, I'm the one who forgives everyone, he's sort of contradicting himself, when because he says you and I are one, so who's to be forgiven here? So this was something that I thought I'll share.
Maybe you have made a very beautiful point that from avataric perspective, Kshama is an ability to forgive our inability to realize our truth.
Truth. Yes,
Rest everything is incidental, literally.
absolutely.
Fantastic, fantastic.
I was just
Sudhindran, yes.
reminded when Jagdish Brother was mentioning that, look at anything that's Baba, that's also Baba, that's also Baba, and I am Baba within. You know, so that is, as Swami used to mention, that Advaita Darshanam Jnanam. That's what it is. For it is like first you start off with that knowledge, just that repetition, and then finally that realization experience sinks in when you actually experience that oneness with all the beings of the entire universe. And that's why again, when we mistake kshama or forgiveness as a being, a person on the a pedestal forgiving the one below. It's not that, because ultimately Swami says, very nicely that parulu parulu kadaya parameshwarulu. There is nothing, nobody else calls others. There's nothing, no one called other. Parulu kadaya parameshwarulu. So if you consider anybody else as not belonging to you or somebody different or other, there's nothing like that, because every other that you consider is actually God. Swami mentions that. So that is actually going to the peak of Advaita, when you find that there's absolutely no differentiation between, when you realize, as the if you consider, that Swami's example of how all the droplets make the ocean, and how Swami used to say that, Swami used to give that lovely example, that he used to point out those series of bulbs in Cyclone and says, you're all the bodies that in so many bodies that are there, like are these bulbs, but the current that flows within, that's the divine Atma. And how there are various balloons, but the air within the balloon and air outside, it's all the same. So ultimately Swami always comes back to the same thing, that parulu parulu kadaya, there's nobody who is different from you, because all that is just that one supreme being. So it's up to us to realize that that Advaita Darshanam Jnanam. Ultimately, when we realize that, we become Jnani. Yeah, thank you, brother.
I think you all have really beautifully, put the direction, because once you start looking it from that prism, that glass, the definition of all these words change. They become
Absolutely.
something fantastic. They become so beautiful, and I think that is what the whole thing is about. Yes, Hemant, you were saying something. Yeah.
No, I think the English translations don't do us justice here. When we say kshama, we limit it to just forgiveness, but kshama is a little more broader. It is like having that tolerance. Sahana comes into it. That being able to tolerate, and it's when we talk about Bhagwan's tolerance, he's able to put up with us, no matter how many ever times he instructs us. We are back. We are like the Swami says, like the dog's tail. We'll never be straightened. But he has that kshama. He keeps forgiving, keeps tolerating all that we do, and that is again. Imagine how many times you forgive yourself. You do how many your mistakes, but the next morning you're fine. Okay, I did it. You forgive yourself, although you may feel bad about about it, what you did, but you forgive yourself, and that's how I'm able to live out my life. Otherwise I would not come out of my room if I didn't forgive myself. And that's the same thing with Bhagwan also. He is able to forgive us because he knows, he sees us in him, he sees himself in us, and he's tolerating everything that we do, hoping that one day we will realize, one day we will understand, and we will realize that we are divinity. And until Until that happens, he'll keep forgiving us. But we
I want to
shouldn't.
add up another flavor to this discussion. From a human perspective, that forgiveness, when we start talking about learning about forgiveness, people say that before you forgive others, you got to forgive yourself. Before that, let me bring in our brother Raju also has come in. Ranganath, Raju, Sairam. So you have come at the end of the discussion, but still, welcome and thanks for joining us. So Raju, we are discussing about, we discussed about little bit about Daya, and now we are in Shama of the Kalas of Avatar as an indicator points. Okay, so okay, please continue. And Raju, you feel free to join. And you wanted him to some quote something. Well, he's here, so maybe you want to
Yeah.
remind him, and he can
So
jump in there.
exactly, Ranganath, that poem, beautiful poem by Swami on Kshama, Kshama Tejasvinam Tejaha. If you remember that, it will be fantastic for every one of us to revisit those beautiful words.
I think we can give Raju some time. I think Raju, you're muted.
Yeah.
Sairam, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just give me a few minutes. I will join the discussion. I just need to sink in my thoughts. And meanwhile, I'll also recollect the poem
Sure,
that
sure.
Yeah.
Jagdish has asked me.
Okay.
That's the poem that, so in the Mahabharata war, Draupadi and Bhima during the Vanavas, they are constantly attacking Dharmaja, the Yudhishthira. You are useless. That's why we are struggling like this. Draupadi from one side, Yudhishthira, the Bhima from one side. Arjuna is like he has gone off on pilgrimage. There's no one to support him. And Nakula Sahadeva are too young to like voice against Bhima and anything. So continuously they're hammering, and that's when Dharmaja says this. This is from Bharavi's Kiratarjaniyam. He's talking about Kshama, having tolerate, being able to tolerate. So Kshama Tejasvinam Tejaha, Kshama Brahma Tapasvina, Kshama Danam, Kshama Yashaha. He talks about the glory of Kshama, but I think if we limit it to just forgiveness, we'll make the mistake of Prithviraj with Muhammad Gori. Keep forgiving. There's a limit. So I think for just limiting Shama to just forgiveness is one side of the story. But again, we need to go back to that Advaita Sthiti, going back to why we need to forgive, why we need to tolerate, because we need to improve. We need to realize that unity, and we need to realize that oneness.
See, Shama also has a relationship with compassion. If you look at it, it is out of compassion that you have Shama. And because of Shama, you are having tolerance, you are having patience. So there is a lot of connectivity in that thought. That's why I'm asking you that people understand that how do I forgive myself? What does it mean to forgive yourself before you forgive others? Does it make sense?
Yeah. I'll just add one point here, brother. In one of the books, I don't exactly remember, probably it is the Autobiography of Yugi. They say that once in a billion lifetimes, one person among the billion, so just imagine if the population is a billion or a few millions, one in those million, over a lifespan of millions of births, he gets to realize. So if you now look at his kshama or his compassion, it's basically the mistakes, do pag aage ek pag piche, that very beautiful bhajan, that I move one step ahead forward and then I take two steps back, and I keep repeating those mistakes again and again and again, and he has to put up with it. And that is the sort of the magnitude of his compassion. We become restless when a person makes the same mistake in our presence the second time. If we tell somebody something, and if he makes the mistake immediately, we sort of lose our cool or lose our temper. And if he does it over 5 or 6 times, we just literally driven nuts. But just think about his compassion, that he sees us. There's a very beautiful quote in which Swami says, I have been seeing you evolve through millions of lifetimes, and then you have come to me. That means how much of our mammoth ignorance or our mammoth stupidity has he put up with in all these many lifetimes? And yet, after all that foolishness, we go to him and we say, Swami, and Swami very beautifully says, his reply is Yemi Bangaru. And that is his compassion. We have no words to define that.
I think
So
as
let me bring back the same point to all of you. Please help, because people are also asking that. So, what does it mean to forgive yourself, and how do you look at it in the process of learning? Shama.
Brother, just one striking difference, that I think Swami has also mentioned about it. The difference between God and man or humans. You know, human, we do 100 mistakes and we do one correct thing. God forgives us and He takes us, with Him. But humans to other humans, you do 100 good things and one bad thing, and the humans are upset. Just look at how diametrically opposite and that speaks about compassion as well. I mean, kshama, forgiveness, that you do 100 mistakes and you do one good thing, God is ready to forgive us and take us across. One take one step and I'll come 100 steps forward towards you. But the human's tendency is that do 99 good things and one bad thing, and then relationship just goes for a toss,
So
because we don't
that
have
is
that kind of understanding and the tolerance and that kind of we are not perfect. In no way we can claim to be perfect. God is the only perfect being, but when He is so compassionate, then how much more forgiving and tolerant we must be?
yeah.
That's a question that each of us have to ponder within.
There is a beautiful episode in the Mahabharata when Durvasa, along with his entourage, visits the Pandavas, and basically Duryodhana sends them. He wanted Durvasa, being a short-tempered sage, he wanted them to curse the Pandavas. So he says, go to the Pandavas; they are having a banquet. So you can and just imagine, though there is a poor family in exile, from where can they host a banquet for Durvasa and his 100 odd disciples? And they're struggling, and they basically, Durvasa is ready to curse the Pandavas if he is not going to be fed sumptuous meal. That is man. On the other side, Krishna, who comes to rescue, asks Draupadi, is there anything left, even a grain left in the Akshay Patra? Is that left? So basically, we look at adversities or we look at things in a totally different perspective. God is basically looking for that needle in that haystack of mistakes, that goodness, that needle of goodness in that haystack of our foolishness or goodness or mistakes, sorry, whatever. And look at Durvasa's outlook. He was basically looking at one mistake. You make a mistake in feeding me, and I am going to curse you. And the Lord there says, is there anything in that plate left? A leaf, a grain, that too half eaten. I am willing. And that is probably the stark difference between what God's expectations are and what humans, or how humans are used to behaving with one another.
But just to recollect and add to what Jagdish is saying, uh, the poem that Swami quotes about Kshama, Kshama Satyamu, Kshama Dharmamu, Kshama Yogamu, Kshama Ahimsa, Kshama Yajnamagun, Kshama Acharamu, Kshama Daya, Kshamaye Adharamagu Sarvam Bunakun. Which means Kshama is Satya, Kshama is Dharma, Kshama is Yoga, Kshama is Ahimsa, Kshama is Yajna, Kshama is Achara, that is habit, Kshama is Daya, Kshama is Adhara, that is the basis for the entire sustenance of the universe. Now, I recollect one of our brothers, one of our student brothers, he had, for some reason, whatever, due to immaturity or whatever past vasanas, he left hostel abruptly, being quite upset with this brother did not want to reveal his name, but he had told me in one of those emotional outbursts that he had in Kulwant Hall. So I was sitting right behind him. So then, quite senior brother, so he had left hostel abruptly with some concerns, and also with lost faith that Swami is no more God. So with that kind of faith, he left, uh, and the life took various turns, and he realized his folly. He wrote a letter to Swami, came back. Then Swami did not speak to him first time, but he continued to be there. And I think third or fourth time, Swami called him, and Swami was speaking to him as if nothing had happened. And interview was going on. This boy was feeling so guilty that he had wrote a letter of various accusations to Swami when he was leaving. I mean, that kid when he was leaving. So he that all those thoughts were running in his head, and this brother was he was not able to talk comfortably to Swami. He's not able to look directly into Swami's eyes, so he's looking somewhere down, up. He's trying to hold Swami's feet again, withdrawing himself. You can make out that he is not his own self. And then this conversation happens where he tells Swami, Swami, please forgive me. And immediately Swami responds saying that I have forgiven you long back. Then this boy still, that pain is in his eyes. He's crying. His eyes are almost moist, and he's choking. And Swami says, "It is not me who has not forgiven. It is you who have not forgiven yourself. Forgive yourself."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And the minute Swami said it, there is some kind of transformation in him, and there is that peace descended. And he said, from that day, Swami had not spoken to him again, but it never mattered. Now that relationship with Swami that is within, it has become so strong that there is no necessity for the physical Swami to speak. So he says, he was telling me that day that, brother, do not feel guilty for the things that have happened in your life. They have happened for a reason. Learn from those things that have happened. And he was telling me a very beautiful sentence. He said, brother, there is a believing, knowing, and understanding. I know why he said it, but when I look at the 16 colors, that's what runs in my head. He said that there is a belief, and when this belief within you, when it grows with your knowledge or the experience of life, that becomes a bit of knowing. And that knowing has to turn into understanding. So when we say that Swami loves us, you believe right now that he loves you. And through experiences, you know that he loves. But when you completely understand that he loves you, then there is no necessity of forgiveness. And similar is the case with all of us. I think avatar is a beautiful concept that is brought in by our Sanatana Dharma to convey that each one of us is that transcendental divinity, just that lost in the hustle and tussle of life. And I think the minute we understand what it is to be one with the entire universe, Kshama becomes a nature. Like the sun glows, fire burns, Kshama becomes our nature.
You
Beautiful,
mentioned this very beautiful story of Bhagwan, and that you brought a beautiful point about Swami saying, you haven't forgiven yourself. I'm still trying to
Yes.
put my mind around it. It's a phenomenal thought. It'll take some time for me to, assimilate the essence of it. But just to hear your thoughts, what do you think he meant, and what is expected of the person to do?
I think.
Is it reconciliation with some sort? I don't know.
No, I look at it as like usually we are quick to forgive others sometimes, if you notice, but not our own selves. Um, and I think it's a sign of immaturity and ego that we think we are infallible, that we cannot have made such mistakes, that we cannot have done this. Our ego is so big that we cannot forgive ourselves. And it's that is the root cause. Once we realize that no, it is
Beautiful.
we are not. We are
Very
equally
beautifully put.
valuable. Then we push it behind us because when we know the other person can make mistakes, okay, we say okay, they don't know better, so they make mistakes, and we forgive and move on. But when it comes to ourselves, we think no, we are actually much better than this. It's a sign of it's just a sign of ego, and that's I think that's a very beautiful instance. I think the lesson there, to me at least, was Swami is saying get rid of that ego that you cannot make mistakes. Everyone make mistakes. Move on and realize that. And when we think of Kshama, I think Swami puts it on a pedestal, like Raju's and Jagdish quoted the Padyam and Kshama. Swami puts it on. It's a very important quality for a devotee. Being so when we talk of Kshama, it's just not forgiveness. It is a tolerance that comes in. Being able to put up with the difficulties that come in life, being able to understand that these are all acts or prasadam from Bhagwan, prasadam from God, and still holding on and not losing faith, that is a sign of Kshama. And so that is, it's just not forgiveness, but being accepting and being tolerating and still pursuing sadhana and not letting go. That is equally a facet of Kshama. not just forgiving mistakes of others and moving on.
I like that input. Actually, it just gives me a thought. Really beautiful it is that, forgiving yourself, first thing is our ego only, that we have to give up. Any other flavors, Jagdish, Sudhindran?
I'll just add one shloka from the Ishavasya Upanishad that is actually used as the Karma Kanda, the final rites. I don't mean to bring any bad omens in any sort, but it has a very spiritual and a philosophical significance. The shloka is Vayur Anilam Amrutam Athedam Bhasmantam Shariram Om Kruto Smara Krutam Smara Kruto Smara Krutam Smara. It very beautifully says the breath Vayur Anilam Amrutam. Vayu, the breath is eternal. Vayu Anulam Amrutam Athedam Bhasmantam Shariram. Your breath is eternal. It's a property of God, but your body is temporary. It is supposed to get reduced to ashes. It will reduce to ashes. So, oh mind, what should you do? He says, oh mind, Krito Smara, Kritam Smara. Think of him and think by him. Think of him, think by him. The think of him part is basically you are trying to give some kind of a positive reinforcement to think about him. Think by him is that part which Hemant now mentioned. It's the humongous ego which we sort of makes us feel that we are infallible. We cannot make any mistake. We can never be wrong. It's only the other person. The think by him tells us realize that if you are able to think, it's not because of you. There is a supreme power that is enabling you to think. It's enabling you to do. So if you are aware of that facet, that it's not you, you will not make that foolish mistake of thinking that you cannot be wrong. And that kshama, that thing comes because of this understanding. And how does that understanding develop over time is Kritosmara, Kritam Smara, Kritosmara, Kritam Smara. Keep thinking of this and keep reminding yourself that every aspect is his prasadam, is his gift.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, anybody?
No, I think just as an extension of that, ultimately it boils down to faith, isn't it? That when we realize that it's all God's divine plan, and we have to accept things as it comes. No, we may be, X or even ourselves, we may be apparently the cause of something good or something bad, but ultimately we have to realize that it's all happening for good, and it is whatever happens, we may consider good or bad. Ultimately, it is happening because of divine will and by divine design, and it is all for our ultimate good. That faith, once we have, then it gets easier for us to forgive others, forgive ourselves, and then look up. If we fall down, get up. Brush our clothes and again try walking. Get back into whatever we're doing, because we have the faith that it is all part of Bhagavan's mission, and I mean Bhagavan's will, and our process of learning and sadhana. I
So
think it.
basically, if I have to, I'm just trying to understand and assimilate in myself also. Basically, what I'm trying to understand is that Shama for myself is my ability to accept my inability to realize myself and be fine with that, but continue my journey and my struggles. As if Swami is forgiving me. When I go to Bhagavan and say, Swami, sorry, I made a mistake. And he says, no problem, carry on. Past is past. So the ability to do that myself in genuineness is that what is forgiving yourself?
Yes, true,
It's
brother.
also not dwelling so much on your shortcomings,
Correct. Move on.
move on and don't keep dwelling and thinking that I am wicked, I am bad. Swami says you are Amritasya Putra. You are not the body. You are that spark of immortality. Don't reduce yourself to being a sinner. Don't reduce yourself to being wicked. These are all just like ash covering the spark of the coal, the embers. It's just like ash, that is, you need to blow it away. And so don't dwell on that and move on. So we can look at it as either ego, forgiving yourself, all of those aspects. But again, it's realizing that divinity and knowing that you are not that. That is just a garb that you're wearing, and you need to come out of that and express your true divinity. I think that's
Let
how
me
we
add one more flavor to the discussion. I'm just, as I said to you before, this is not going from one to another. We are just adding a flavor. So, okay, before I move into another one, I have a question coming up from Mishra sir, Vijay Mishra sir, and let me flash it here. So, he's our favorite teacher, so I know all of you want to handle that. Is forgiving yourself making light of your mistakes, which might lead you to commit it again? Okay, now, please.
Mishra sir
knowing
is
that,
a sage. He's
yeah.
when he puts a question, it has deep thought, and it also means so many things for so many people. No, I'm sure the reason for him to put up this question is not that he is not aware of this answer, but just that he wants us to answer that so that our
So we can learn.
brothers and sisters. Yes,
We can. Absolutely.
absolutely. Yes.
So let us discuss it. I think it's a very beautiful question he has presented for us.
There was one brother. This incident comes to my mind. There was one of our brothers who had this habit of having non-vegetarian food when he goes for vacation. So in winter vacation, he had non-vegetarian food. He comes back. Swami was not happy with him, so he sought forgiveness, and he cried. And then Swami, after a few days, the relationship mended. Swami was normal. And Swami speaking to him the way he would speak to him. Then again comes the summer vacation. He goes back. Again, brother was not able to resist the temptation. He commits himself to the non-vegetarian food. Comes back again in June end. Sorry, in the June beginning, May end, and Swami is again upset with him. Now he this time he's quite prepared, because his grandfather also happens to be a philosopher, I mean a well-read poet. So he quotes lines and verses from Ramayana, where Sita, apparently in one of the, as per one of the versions of Ramayana, one of the versions, each Kavi had his own version. One of the versions, convenient version, which was selected by this brother and his grandfather, was that Sita offers Ravana that no, she tells Ravana that if you want, I will prepare some meat for you. I mean, she asks him like, would you want some meat? And Ravana, where he refuses. So the fact that she's asking meat means that no, they are not ours. So he was trying to justify himself through a letter to Swami, saying that Swami, in those days, when you came as Rama, Sita, the families, the customs are like that. That we had, they used to have a non-vegetarian. So I also had. You should forgive me this time. Please, I'm so sorry. So Swami apparently took the letter, but Swami is not speaking to him. And this continued for 2-3 days. Then he asked one of the professors. He says, "Sir, I have done my best. I have given this letter to Swami. Swami is not speaking to me. Why? Why you think so?" The professor said, "You meditate, you pray to Swami. Swami will give you answer. But however, I feel it is not because, not that Swami is upset that you have eaten, that you continue to do the same mistake, but it is because you have not learned from the first time. Now, repeating the same mistake is an act of foolishness. It's ignorance. It is a sign that you have not learned." And next day, Swami is standing right in front of him. Swami not talking to him. He is talking to one of the professors who is there in the veranda. And this professor, he tells the professor, saying that, see, when it is required, this Lord teaches you, ప్రేమతో చెప్తాడు, దండించి చెప్తాడు, బెదిరించి చెప్తాడు. He will threaten you, he will punish you, he will beat you, he will tell you out of love, but he will not leave till you learn. And he looks at him and says, learn, do not make this mistake again, learn, and walks away. Now, just taking cue from there, and the question that Mr. Sir asked, I think that learning is more important. When we say when we forgive ourselves, it is one aspect is yes reconciling. Another important aspect is learning from the incident so that we don't repeat it again.
I will add one small thing here to what Raju very beautifully summarized. What is evolution, or what is the journey towards realization? There is something right and there is something wrong. At the end of the day, right and wrong is something conjured up by our mind in his creation. If you look at it from the Advaitic point of view, what is right, what is wrong? It's a definition that we have made. However, in this journey, when we decide that something is right and something is wrong, do we have the conviction to stick on to the right? After having been convinced, this is a question that Duryodhana asks Krishna in the Mahabharata. Janami dharmam nachame pravrittihi. I know what is right and wrong. Don't lecture me on what is dharma. I know what is dharma. What I do not have is the willingness to follow dharma, or the willingness to follow what is right. Can you give me that? And the sort of, because many people might be wondering that there might be so many non-vegetarians, will Swami be equally upset with everyone? The point is not about being vegetarian or not. The point was having understood for yourself that, okay, vegetarianism is good for me, so I should not eat meat. Having convinced myself, did I have the conviction to follow it continuously? If I did not, and if I fell back, and if that conviction was defeated, I slipped from the Shreyo Marga back to the Preyo Marga, from Shreyas back to Preyas. That is probably a step down. And as Raju very beautifully said, Mishra sir is one of the most respected teachers, a sage unto himself. And there is definitely nothing that we can, there's nothing, the question that he posed is not because he wanted to know, is probably for us to understand. Have we discovered enough of what we are talking about? So we are grateful to him for that.
So I'm sure we'll ask him, sir, have we passed or failed? Excellent. Okay. So thank you. I think it's a fantastic thought, that repetition of the mistake, once realize that it is a mistake, is the key for self-forgiveness, and not to brood upon it. Sorry. I think I was trying to get the, yeah. So let me add another flavor to our discussion, and I think is the last one. Or I think time is also getting off. But let me just throw the tapasya. If anybody wants to add a flavor of what does tapasya, because it's a very contradictory word. You don't expect avatar to be tapasvi. Tapasvi seems to be from an academic point of view that it's only the penance is done by the humans and going upwards. So what is the tapasya doing it for avatar? Anybody?
If I may, if I may add, brother, Swami very clearly gives a definition of tapasya in many discourses. He says the first and foremost definition repeatedly Swami gives is the unity of thought, word, and deed is tapasya. That is the prime tapasya for any human being. And I think from that point of view, yes, it makes a lot of sense that the avatar has that. And probably other brothers can add in.
I will just add from a technological point of view. Just imagine you are basically given a sort of device, a small memory, a device with a memory, a robo, which has certain commands fed into it. There's a small memory in which you probably program it, and it's able to perform certain actions. After one day, you erase that memory, and you still want that robot to perform the actions. It's literally impossible. His tapasya is basically after every birth, we sort of our memory at some level gets erased, the physical part of it. We have no clue what it is. And the understanding of those actions are supposed to seep in, and we are not supposed to make those mistakes. And he has to patiently wait till we are in a position where we are making no mistakes. He literally has to do a handstand every time we take birth. And that is the kind of dangerous waters he has to just think from that point of view. On one side, Raju is very beautifully put, but on the other point, just see the penance in teaching us how not to make those mistakes again and again is something which my mind goes into.
I think Raju gave a beautiful. So Raju,
yes,
I think.
Please carry on.
Sorry. Yeah, I think Raju mentioned that we need to, Swami says it is unity of thought, word, and deed. And that doesn't, so if I learn to ride a bicycle, I have learned it once. I don't need to keep learning it. And whenever I ride, it is there with me. It's for the rest of my life. But this unity of thought, word, and deed is constant. It has to be there all through your life and every moment of your life, because you're either thinking or you are talking or you're doing something. It is a constant thing that you must always be like aware. What is it that I'm thinking? What is it? So that is the tapas. It is constant. It is always there with you. And so it's not something that you achieve and it's there. It is a constant process and it is lifelong. So as long as I have this mind, as long as I have this body, I need to be engaged in the tapas. And it is a fire, tapa. The root word is tapa, which is a fire that is there burning inside. And that is, am I am I integrated in my thought, word, and deed? Is there unity in all of that? And then Swami says that is the ideal man. Swami, whenever Swami talks about the unity of thought, word, and deed, he if you go to the discourses, he'll always follow it with the proper study of mankind is man. And so that is the ideal human being. So he's engaged always in this tapas of thought, word, and deed unity. That's beautiful, how Swami
See,
puts it.
nobody can pun the words like Bhagavan does, that's for sure. And the way he will define is something which we can meditate for rest of our life. When you look at tapasya from this definition of unity of thought, word, and deed, well, as Swami also said, no, that there is a Sanskrit verse also, right? Manas ekam, vachanam ekam, Mahatmanam. So
Mahatman.
it is basically that whole concept is that only. That once you have that, then you are tapasvi. So when you look at from avataric perspective, he has not risen to that. He actually depicts that unity of thought, word, and deed. And there is a one concept hidden in it. Maybe we can discuss it a little later also. Is that being in the present? Because that concept of thought, word, and deed unity happens in the present. So I don't know how you want to relate that tapasya to being in present. You can
I
unmute
would
yourself.
just,
Ah,
yeah, I would just add here, brother. Saint Francis of Assisi, in the book God's Pauper, actually talks about God. He says God is a conflagration. He burns and he burns others. He literally compares God to that fire. He says he's that fire who constantly keeps burning. Not an ordinary fire, not a matchstick fire. He's a
wow,
conflagration. It's a
beautiful way of
huge
saying it.
fire. He burns and he burns others. If you practice that constantly, it's something mammoth we just can't even comprehend. But when we look at him doing it, we get inspired. That conflagration probably becomes an inspiration for us to do something better in our life. That is something that probably happens over a period, probably lifetimes, and we are able to sync with that. When does that happen? That happens only when at every point in time we are aware of our thought, our word, and deed. We are able to imbibe a small portion of that only if we are aware, and that happens, as Swami said, being in the presence, which is also the omnipresence. He keeps telling this present is not an ordinary presence. He says it's an omnipresence. So manasyekam, vachasyekam, karmanyekam, mahatmanam, the unity of all those three, and more importantly, Swami stresses not merely the unity, but the purity, trikarana shuddhi, what he tells, the purity of the thought, word, and deed, which actually makes one great. Because a thief can think in the morning that he's going to steal. He literally goes up and ends up, tells his co-conspirator that I'm going to steal, and he ends up stealing in the night. But does that make him a Mahatma? No, there's no Shuddhi there. So it's not just the unity, but also the purity of thought, word, and deed that Swami
Beautiful.
has explained.
Who can improve upon Vedic dictums? The one who has given Vedas. So only Bhagavan can improve upon the verses itself,
Yeah,
like
I think
Samastaloka, Samasta, he could make Samastaloka. Only he has the authority and the status to even make a dent, a little bit changes on that. It's fantastic.
I think you touched upon a very important aspect, Abhi brother, and Jagdish brought out that concept of omnipresence, which is, I think, very important for this Trikarana Shuddhi. Because let's say I'm being watched. When I'm being watched, I am at my best behavior. Right? I'm and especially when I'm in Swami's presence, physically, if I go back, I will make sure I'm dressed well, I'm looking well, I'm also doing right behavior, and more importantly, even my thoughts. I know, okay, Swami can read my thoughts. I better not think any stupid things. Many a times, sitting in Swami's presence, I've had to like put a check on my thoughts. So it's like when you know that you're being watched, you are at your best behavior. And that is what is omnipresence. When you know there is God always around you, when you know that Bhagwan is there within you and in your presence, when you truly believe that, you will always be in that state of tapasya. We'll always make sure that your thoughts are pure, your words are pure. You will not use bad language. You will not think wicked thoughts or thoughts which are unbecoming of you, or you will not do things which will bring which will make Swami hurt Swami's feelings. So that shuddhi will automatically come when you live in the present, which is Swami says is omnipresent, and know that Swami is there watching you, and or you are Swami himself.
Beautiful. Brothers, I think the time is calling, so we have to be careful about to respect the time. And I would only pray to Bhagwan that he gives us strength to continue this discussion. There is so much to explore and so much to learn from each of these attributes of the God avatar. So we would humbly close this session for tonight and request to continue this further. So before we close, any final words, all of you, please. Sudhindran, Ranga, anything you want to say as a summation or whatever? Till next week we meet again.
Brother, I have just this thought that has been running in my head uh, since last few days when you had shared the 16 kalas attributes of avatar. Yeah, it is. We are at the fag end of the discussion. This is just that we can ruminate over it. Probably all the brothers and sisters who are with us right now listening to it, as it is mentioned, and I'm sure brother Hemant also brought it up in the earlier session, that we each one of us is that Amsha avatar. We ourselves are an avatar, the Supreme Self. Now, if you look at the 16 attributes and you look at them little more carefully, little more thoughtfully, now they fall into, and we have these four buckets: Vyasti, that is individual; Samishti, society; Srushti, nature; and Parameshti. Now, these 16 attributes, when we look carefully, each one sits in one of the four. Now, it is a way, it is a manual for an individual of a limited capacity to evolve himself into an avatar. And in one of the discourses, Swami very clearly points out that the basis of the journey, the foundation of the journey are three. That is tapasya, kshama, and dhairya. At the Vyasti level, this and those in turn lead to other things. At a Samishti level, it is, and others will follow at a Vyasti level. We can probably deliberate some other time. At Samishti level, it is more of Nyaya, it is Nirapeksha, impartiality, and Dana. At a Srushti level, it is Niti and it is Daya. At a Parameshti level, now Parameshti level, these are the final outcomes of yourself when you pass through on a continuous basis, when you are doing the tapasya of thought, word, and deed unity, when you have the dhairya that I can face anything, or the ability to bear anything, and complete detachment, nirashakti, eventually the personality would transform itself in such a manner that at a samishti level you are able to display that impartiality, nyaya; at a sushti level, daya, and that omniscience, omnipotence, or aparajaya, the invincibility would emerge through you. You look at the entire sequence of Rama's life. At no point of time he declared himself to be the Lord, but every lesson that was taught by Vasishtha was dutifully, sincerely learned by Rama, that enabled him to win over Ravana. It is not, he very clearly says, I have only learned 16, but I have learned those 16 Shastras perfectly. You have learned 64, but you have not learned them perfectly. That that tapasya, when Rama was sitting in Vasishta's class, probably he was doing the tapasya, that when my master is telling my unity thought, word and deed, and he's continuously doing that, and that made him invincible eventually. And I think this is a ladder for an individual self to become the avataric self. That is my closing thought. Probably we can take this up some
Beautiful.
other time.
Sure, sure, sure. Yes, Hemant
Yes.
Sudhindran. Yeah,
Yeah, so very beautifully put, Raju brother. It's amazing. It's actually it's basically a progress from humanity to divinity, or rather from being an animal to a human to divine. It's that kind of a thing. And ultimately, the one thing I would say, the universal solution, so to say, is you know. How to become God is trying to be God, not outside but within. When we actually, like we what we discussed earlier, when we have that Advaita Bhavam, then all of this daya, sahanam, kshama, dhairyam, everything follows with that. No, it's not everything. It's not distinct. It's all clubbed together. It's one is everything is so interrelated. It's actually avinabhava sambandham. One cannot be without the other. It's all bunched up together, and that becomes easy for us to practice once when we know that Advaita Darshanam Jnanam. Once we know that inherently we know that all of us are one. That there's just one supreme divinity. There's nothing else, and we are all just that one. Once we have that kind of we consciously we are conscious of that when we practice it and try to apply it sensibly in our daily lives, I think then everything else will automatically fall into line. So that's what I want to share with you, brothers. Thank
beautiful.
you.
Beautiful.
Saira.
Hemant.
I think like we started off with thinking of 16 colors, but I mean, looking at, we just happened to just discuss maybe three of them, but that is the beauty of it. And I love the characterization that Brother Raju brought about, that, and how Sudhindran also mentioned that we evolve, and as we evolve from individual level to the Parameshti level, which is the total Advaitic state, we will see that unity of all of these, and these will just be aspects of that divine form. In fact, many other attributes and aspects may be added to that, and it is that, I mean, all of these are that are reflections of that divinity. I am that I that is there in you, me, and in all of this creation, that unity, and that is the goal of this. I think this discussion, to be able to realize that oneness.
Thank you. Jagdish.
I was sort of the last speaker who spoke a marathon before all of you summarized here. So I'll just keep it short in a way that this is our own journey. It's, as Raju very beautifully put it, it's a template for us to evolve ourselves. And as we had discussed, and Brother Hemant and Brother Sudhindran also brought out, that limited form that we are looking at in each of these attributes, we are trying to make it limitless by trying to understand what is the crux, what is the central theme which sort of unifies everything. And this is a more of a lesson and a sadhana for me personally, more than for anyone or anybody else. And I'm sure that is the feeling that is so very relevant for each one of us in that way. So thank you.
Excellent. I never expected the discussion to go in this direction, but it is beautiful. That's why there's a beauty of Bhagwan. We start with something, but we learn what is expected from us. So thank you, brothers, for this beautiful session, for bringing Bhagwan's words and messages to us. And thank you all for joining us tonight. And I hope to see you all next week again, and to continue this journey of discussion and to hear more stories about Bhagwan and his learning. Thank you so much. Sai Ram.